Welcome to the Terrascope Climate Cafe podcast, featuring conversations from the world of enterprise decarbonization, ESG practices, and the transition to our net zero future. I'm Leah Nicholson, Terrascope's head of sustainability, and today I'm hosting Karen Coyne to chat about her career and her corporate leader's perspective on achieving success in decarbonization. She offers up valuable advice for sustainability officers that are just starting out.
That philosophy of collaboration, of having a shared vision around sustainability and climate change and what everybody's role is, and trying to get that message out that was being focused on internally as well, that everybody has a role to play no matter what your job is. And the same with our suppliers, that were really just an extension of the company, them being proud to help enable the company to meet their goal.
Welcome, Karen. We're so thrilled to have you here with us in Singapore today.
Thank you, Leah. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks for joining us. So I'd love to hear a little bit just about yourself, about your experience, what took you into the field of sustainability.
Thanks, Leah. I'm happy to be here today. So my interest in sustainability goes back quite a ways. When I was growing up, my dad was in the oil industry, and we moved around quite a bit as a child. And a number of the places we lived, this was just, family growing up, there wasn't a lot to watch on television. And the one thing that I loved to watch was Jacques Cousteau and his ocean show of, discovering the great depths. And so that was my career aspiration at about 8 years old. So I followed that path through university, through my bachelor's degree, and got a degree in marine fisheries biology. While I was in school and university, I had internships with my dad's company, which was an exploration company, and found that I really loved the business aspects as well. So I decided when I went to graduate school that I would get an MBA, but I wanted to do a green MBA, was the idea of not let the science part go of all my training, but to add the business part to it as well. And at the time, there were just a few programs around. There was one in Florida, I think Florida Institute of Technology. They were very scattered. So I applied to University of New Hampshire, and talked to the business school with my thesis advisor, and they agreed to let me design a green MBA program, and that I take some courses through the business school and then the rest of the courses through this degree in environmental management. And so it was a hybrid degree. So it was really at that intersection of finding business and sustainability, or science, biology, which morphed over time, the types of things that I did, into sustainability, that I found that sweet spot and sort of didn't have any plan other than follow that where it led.
That's wonderful. I also had to do a self-design major, actually, to do a interdisciplinary environment, kind of politics, economics. Yeah. So it's great to see how mainstream the integrated environmental degree is today, and actually it's a relatively recent phenomenon, isn't it? Yeah.
It is. And the institute within University of New Hampshire that I was part of, and where my thesis advisor was housed, was called the Institute for Natural and Environmental Resources. And the whole point of that institute was to have forestry people, fisheries people, resource economics people, all under one roof, and really collaborate around that interdisciplinary nature of what we were studying. And so it was really, I think, the beginnings of not viewing certain disciplines as silos, and that we really do have this interconnectedness between a number of fields.
I love that it all started with Jacques Cousteau as well. When do you remember the first time you got into the water and saw the scuba diving, for example?
No. I would say yes in some way. I mean, I think it would probably more snorkeling versus, being a full-fledged scuba diver. But I have to say, I did not. The little time that I did spend learning to scuba dive, it was not my favorite thing. It just a little bit claustrophobic, and the whole idea of, so.
You got to try things out to know you don't like them, right?
Yeah.
And that was the case, I think, with your first fisheries foray.
Yeah.
Right?
So I applied for and was offered a role with a branch of the government that was monitoring catch offshore from foreign fishing vessels. And they had roles where you would go out and be stationed on a boat for a period of time, different times. And then just, as the fishermen were bringing fish in, monitor the catch and take records of the size and sex and species and all of that. And I decided that I really wanted to go work in an office and do corporate work around this. And so that's what led me into my first role after graduate school.
Which was into?
It was in an environmental consulting company. At the time, it was called Environmental Resources and Technology. And it was a consulting company that had a product division that was focused on regulatory compliance for clients. So clients would sign up for a subscription where this group in the product called EnviroNet would publish regulatory handbooks of laws that applied just to them. So it was a customized compliance manual subscription for clients. So I worked as part of that group as a regulatory analyst, getting the new laws in for each of the states and the federal government, simplifying them in layperson's terms, and then putting in questions around how you would audit around those to determine if you were in compliance.
Wow. So, really interesting.
Yeah, it was. And so I learned a lot about environmental regulations and statutes.
And then you moved on from consulting?
So that was just the early product group, and this company had many different corporate evolutions of either mergers with others or being acquired by others. And in one of those acquisitions, the product service line was shut down. So I applied for a consulting role in the new company as an exiting employee and was accepted. And so then went on for about 15 years of environmental consulting.
What were some of your main kind of project highlights during that time?
Yeah, I started out in compliance auditing because I'd come from the regulatory compliance group. And that was a fantastic experience because you get, as an auditor, you go off for about a week, 5 to 8 business days with a team. And my specialty was in hazardous waste and toxic substances and in environmental in general, some clean air, but really you specialize by statute. So you go off for a week with a team of 4 or 5 people to a client's site and get to walk around the factory or whatever type of site it was and talk with people on the shop floor, find out how they're doing things, how they're storing their hazardous waste. And you go through that compliance audit process for about 4 or 5 days. You meet every morning. You work all day at the site. Then you go out for dinner at night. You meet over dinner to collect your findings, regroup the next day. And then on usually the 5th day, you'd read out to the client and the site management team what you found. And they have a chance to make corrections. So with that experience, got to do all types of industry sectors, automotive, chemical, forestry, did some for GE Capital when looking at their sites that they'd acquired and doing more of a compliance check, but not a full-fledged audit. So just all kinds of different facilities, aerospace, seeing how Harrier jump jets are made, and just so it was a great experience because you got to see how things were made, and one was easy-go golf carts, so it was just really fun.
Sounds like you got your dream job of the office and a little bit of on-site
exactly
experience. How hard was it when you found a problem with the company, like a compliance breach or kind of a major issue?
Yeah.
What was the next steps like?
Well, it depended on how the audit was being scoped and who was the audit client. So was it the company itself who had hired us, and so you could just do the audit and give them the results. Some were done under attorney-client privilege. Some of them were done under a Department of Justice consent decree. And so where there was that kind of consent order that the company was being made to do this, or it was under attorney-client privilege, then it was going through an attorney, and so it was a little bit easier if there were things that were found. But you just had to stick to the facts. This is what I observed, when I observed it, who I spoke with. You just stick to the facts and make your professional judgment that what you saw may not or was not in compliance based on that. And so that's why they had the chance to look through draft findings, because you may have just misunderstood what you saw, or you didn't know that piece of equipment that well, that a certain process happened a different way and it really wasn't, anything that was out of compliance. So, but it was challenging because some of them were really, I'll say that all companies are managed differently, and some were on the beginning journey of compliance, and some were much more mature and had internal staff to help them with running complex facilities. So you saw all sorts of excellent programs, best in practice types of things, and you found other places where they needed some assistance and probably maybe some consulting help, which that was before Sarbanes-Oxley, where you needed to you ended up keeping consulting and auditing separate. So you don't want auditors out finding things and then flipping them over to the company to get the consulting work to fix it. So, I mean, some of that happens, but yeah.
Yeah, separation of roles. It sounds similar to where many companies globally are at with the addressing climate change in a systematic way, for example. And I'd love to hear about how this strong compliance and auditing basis and consulting work that you did, then kind of bringing that into the Fortune 200 company. What was that journey like joining?
And so after I did consulting, I did a number of other roles, which were related to ultimately where I ended up in a Fortune 200 company. So I learned different things along the way and had different clients. So when I joined the Fortune 200 company, it was really the first time being inside the company as an employee. And so it was an amazing opportunity. And the story behind it is one of my team from the consulting company, we were out actually visiting a client, doing an audit and of an automotive tier 1 supplier. And we were driving to the site and I told him, look, John, I'm leaving the company. I'm going to go pursue a different opportunity. And he just was, that's devastated. But I had groomed him to be my replacement. And several years later, so I'd left and I'd moved on to run a professional association of auditors. And he called up and said, we kept in touch. And he said, I had this recruiter call me for this role in Boston with a pharma company. And he had said, I'm not interested in leaving, but you should call Karen. And so one thing led to another. And so was able to join the company in the research division, overseeing their global health and safety and business continuity program. So coming into the research division, which was great because it was in Cambridge, Massachusetts, just a really vibrant, dynamic part of the company and the location. And at that point, the focus of the role was on, environmental health and safety and business continuity and ensuring that as dynamic as that organization is, research is a very dynamic process of using different sites, maybe working on one process at one site and then the actual compound be shipped to another location for a different team to work on. So a lot of movement globally of samples and such. And a lot of different projects, the way that it's organized around research projects for a particular disease area. It was just very dynamic. And so it was working with the scientists in the labs to bring health and safety in as part of their normal daily activities, but trying to flip that orientation from a policing type, health and safety officer, it sounds so like punitive, flipping it around to a support function and to, be an enabler for the scientists to do their work, but still be in compliance with the regulations and in conformance with any procedures or corporate standards. So it was really focused on that at first, and that sustainability aspect of it was one that developed over time, I would say. The corporate group, the corporate health and safety at group level, overseeing those areas for the entire company. So the research division, there was a division that made generic drugs. There was a vaccines division at that point, an eye care unit. That the group level was really just sort of setting the corporate standards. And it really wasn't sustainability oriented. It was more, here's our energy efficiency goals here. So it set some goals and corporate standards, but it wasn't really the active part of integrating it into the site or division level.
And at what point did you start to integrate climate change? Because it sounds like it was a kind of research-focused health and safety, and then that broader strategy element. What was that journey like?
So that started to be integrated through the process of organizational restructuring of the company and bringing the elements of the company that were sort of legacy divisions into a new group level structure. part of which was setting up a center of excellence for a new division that oversaw the environment, health and safety, and business continuity activities for everything except for manufacturing, the technical operations. So it was so I moved from research and the research global head of HSE to this new HSE head that was going to set up a brand new center of excellence at the new division level, but overseeing a large footprint of the company. So it was through that process and being able to design, the first of a couple times, we designed a new team to cover some of these newer elements around sustainability and climate, but kind of loosely. I mean, it was, I would say, an interim step. And then through another functional reorganization, there was going to be a new corporate HSE group, more expanded, and where a team was put together to imagine what that group level function should be to support Novartis overall and its business objectives going forward. So I got the role of working on the environment and sustainability function, and so I was able to, again, take a piece of paper or my laptop and think about what the team needed to look like to be future focused and to meet and help enable Novartis to meet its overall purpose of reimagining medicine. And so it was at that particular point that I said, okay, we need somebody dedicated to climate, need somebody who's dedicated to water resources. We need somebody to oversee supply chain, but from an environmental perspective. We need somebody focused on waste, which was so kind of yesterday thinking, but really materials and circular economy. We need somebody on communication. So with that kind of thinking through what the function should look like, to then take all the fantastic work that had been done at the company before up to that point, to not eject it or anything, but to take that and then just reorient it, all the great work that had been done, because the company had been active in this area for a long time and been doing some fantastic work. But it was gotten so important now to be to integrate in as a corporate good citizen into the corporate responsibility function as a key strategic pillar of being environmentally responsible. And what did that mean? That meant climate commitments. That meant, water commitments, so forth, circular economy and all that. So taking that to then have the A team, I like to call it, that's then going to take what the company had done and then just reorient it, position, add to, raise the bar to the next level of what to meet expectations. And the timing was great because it was leading to the Paris Climate Agreement coming together. And so having this function was really ready to go, hit the ground running.
So Novistar had this kind of organizational restructuring, window of opportunity to elevate environment and sustainability. You made your case for your A team with your supplier engagement, your climate, your water. Yeah. And it happened to be 2015 was the Paris Agreement. Mm-hmm. And so 2016, you're getting ready for enforcement and thinking. So that sounds like a really amazing journey. How, in setting out the climate goals and strategy for the company, because I think Novistar went on to make some pretty significant commitments to operational neutrality by 2025, net zero across all supply chains by 2030. And what were the data systems and information systems that you felt like helped you, or what were some of the crucial kind of underlying elements that you needed to make that case and to get that buy-in?
So some of that was already in place using the data management system that was in place, and then concurrently looking at what the new strategy would be, because the company had ambitious goals relative to what their operations were prior and had been meeting them early. So it was always needing to had that mindset anyways of raising the level of ambition. And to do all the great work that had been done, there was a data management system that tracked initially compliance-oriented data around water effluent, emissions, air emissions, all of those things that were regulatorily required for all the sites globally, and rolled up to a corporate level system that was then used for external reporting. So it was then taking that and then seeing, are there some indicators that we can use for as we think about a new strategy and a new set of metrics and targets, a new set of targets and metrics on how we're going to measure progress against those, I should say, and what we could use and what we needed to add. So the foundation was there, that the data in-house foundation was there because of the reporting and the rigor of that. So it was really an easy aspect in that sense, in terms of what we needed to do. I think so that being in place was great. What the real work was really, what are those targets going to be? Well, first of all, what's our level? What's our ambition? What's our vision? And then for each of the media of climate and water and waste and supply chain, what's our level of ambition and what's kind of our vision, and then defining what the target's going to be for different 2025 and 2030 at that point.
So at that point, there was a lot of, let's zoom into the supplier engagement and supplier kind of portion of that piece. So you were gathering emissions from across the supply chain at that point, or
no?
What was the thinking around that?
We weren't. There was some data being collected on suppliers, particularly the suppliers of choice, the key suppliers. And so there was some data being collected, and some through internal company activities, primarily through the technical operations group that was manufacturing and some, having this manufacturing being done by a third party. Some of the activities that technical operations would go check, so checking that internally, and then through an industry association called PSCI, Pharmaceutical Supply Chain Initiative, where pharma companies gathered together and then collectively had processes to evaluate these suppliers from a coalition sort of standpoint, instead of the sites, these supply chain sites being audited by each of us as a pharma company over and over for the same things. Let's do it in a collective way through PSCI. So that some data was already there. Then with the new environment group, global environment group, having a dedicated person to environmental supply chain, she worked closely with the technical operations group, started to see what they were doing. There was also concurrently a new effort overseen or initiated by the CEO at the time called third-party risk management. So that naturally fed into that to say, okay, key suppliers, but also what's the key risk from an environmental standpoint, other human rights, labor, other issues that companies need to watch out for. So that concurrently was happening. So it really was synergistic to that effort. With the position of environmental supply chain, she was able to then go talk to technical operations and be involved in that. And third-party risk management I was working on. So all those pieces came together. Then the next piece that came together once we got our arms around it was working with CDPs and their supply chain effort, and helping us get more data on those particular suppliers we wanted to focus on. And that's what the woman who was overseeing supply chain led that effort. So it was a good synergistic, opportunistic, everything kind of fell into the right place at the right time. But it took a lot of work. I mean, it was a lot of internal stakeholder engagement.
Who are your key internal stakeholders for that external supplier engagement? And just to put it in context for it, I mean, Novastar has 130,000 different suppliers. So that's a tremendous network to be looking at.
Yeah. And I don't know how many, there, but it's a large number. Mm-hmm. So the internal key stakeholders were, the procurement group particularly, and other stakeholders came along the way, finance and technical operations and the third-party risk and the compliance internal audit, but the audit function in general, risk management for the company.
Was it more you knocking on their door, or did they invite you in? What was that like on a day-to-day basis to engage them?
Well, since none of this was really, other than the request to make the business case on particular roles in the new group was one aspect, but the rest was really, this is something the company is committed to doing and doing right. And so it really wasn't so much kind of knocking on doors. It was informing what was going on, and it was talking to the appropriate management in each of those areas, mostly the technical operations and those that were overseeing third-party risk management, to say, this is what we're trying to do. Can we do it concurrently, or can we be part of this process? So it wasn't really knocking on doors or being invited or not invited. It was just everybody knew what was going on, and it was more just going to talk internally to find out where the best places to plug in to to accomplish what the Global Environment Group was trying to do in a very short amount of time.
So having that common shared vision signals from, I guess, a high level that this is the direction we're going.
Absolutely.
What was that uniting vision, do you think, for the supplier engagement?
I think the shared vision was enabling, and something that's probably part of company DNA. I mean, a healthcare company, helping people get better and cure them, that sort of purpose-driven mindset is ingrained already. So it was really helping enable the key suppliers to have the competence, the knowledge to do their job correctly, or to make what they needed to make to meet laws and to also meet the company expectation. It was a process. The vision was, let's enable our suppliers. There's a lot of time and effort spent in selecting suppliers and getting key suppliers. So you just don't want to say, well, you're not performing at all, and we'll go find somebody else. I mean, these are deep relationships that exist. I mean, there's still the business aspect of what's the price and, the contractual aspect that we weren't involved in at all, but more that philosophy of collaboration, of having a shared vision around sustainability and climate change and what everybody's role is, and trying to get that message out that was being focused on internally as well, that everybody has a piece of this, has a role to play no matter what your job is. And the same with our suppliers, that were really just an extension of the company, them being proud to help enable the company to meet their goal of reimagining medicine and producing great drugs and therapeutics to help people get better and cure them. No one entity can do it, right? SDG 17, right? We have to have the partnerships and collaboration. So it was very much a underlying corporate culture of enabling and helping and supporting that I think was remarkable, because the company had been formed from a number of different companies that went under one corporate umbrella. And so a lot of communication. So that kind of ethos was there anyway. So the shared vision was help enable. They'll do their job better as a supplier. That will help us as a corporation, help the company as a corporation to meet their.
When you were engaging suppliers, so we've got compliance, Karen, and risk enforcement in terms of your auditing background, and then the consulting, and sounds like a really strong enabling and support. So how did you use those two framings? Did you find some framings worked better? And also, what were the forums that you found? Was this kind of one-on-ones? Was this more through the industry coalition group?
Yeah, so the enabling glue between those two separate areas was a part of my career where I focused on environmental management systems, specifically ISO 14001. I did some work around risk management as well. So the same do, plan, do, check, act, ISO structure for management system standards, where compliance is a piece of it, but also there's training, there's finding out what's most significant, what's most material, all those kind of concepts were embedded. So that management system approach of seeing things holistically from a systems standpoint, I spent a lot of years doing that. So it was very natural then going in to do this type of work, that you're looking at the bigger picture, the interconnected systems aspect of it that helped enable the work of the team to go forward.
Systems design, systems thinking, and scalability. Yeah, yes, that sounds really interesting. So I'd love to know, for other chief sustainability officers that are out there, maybe not even CSO roles are in a company yet, and there's just a group of dedicated, passionate individuals that want to have more sustainability in the company, or a company that's looking at regulations coming on and maybe being asked by their own customers, what are they doing on climate? There's a lot of people entering this net zero transition from different places. So for someone just getting started, what would be the piece of advice that you have for them?
So my piece of advice would be first to always ensure that there's management support for what you want to do. And then to look internally who may be in the company as a resource. Not all companies have that ability. Sometimes they just want dedicated teams. Sometimes different companies will let someone have part of their, 20% of their role be sustainability. So look internally to see what you have for resources. Understand, lay out a plan, how you're going to frame this, just very high level. And then start, if it's a beginning of a journey, start to look externally to what other resources there may be, either industry associations, organizations like the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, a lot of the non-governmental organizations. There's a lot of material out there that's available. So seeing what else is out there that then their company could collaborate with or be part of a project or get some training to start expanding the knowledge base and then of what's out there and then start to make a plan. Sometimes it's just, some companies will hire a consulting company to help get them started, maybe do a gap analysis, do a materiality assessment, just to get things going. So I guess the answer, long and short, is look internally, have management support, look internally, understand what management wants the goal to be initially, so that you're not off chasing something, spending a lot of time and effort when it's not really it's not maybe the right time to do it yet. So, and just scaling up, and it can start small and scale up. And some things will work and some things don't. And you want to be fast to fail. And if it doesn't work, you want to know and just move on. And so.
Love it. And I appreciate how some of those lessons come from your initial early thought, like trying out the fisheries, figuring out that's not what you knew, figuring things out and adapting and making decisions. So some great advice from an organizational transformation professional. And I'd love to bring this back to Terrascope. So you're on our Sustainability Advisory Council.
Yes.
What inspired you to join Terrascope's council, and what do you hope to achieve in the role?
Well, first it was just learning about it early on. I know Maya from previous educational efforts that we did, a course that we took, same course. And when she had been appointed to the role of CEO of Terrascope, just pinged her and this is great, Maya, and just started to find out more about it. And it was really a conversation. But just being excited about Terrascope, the space it's in, the time that we're in right now in terms of use of machine learning and AI, the knowing from my past corporate experience how difficult as a corporate getting your arms around the Scope 3 aspects, how labor intensive it is, all the pieces that go into that, it just seems such a natural fit. And just software as a service is just, it's just what seemed like the right time and place. And there's something about startups. I did do a startup earlier in my career, and I just love the energy and the team aspect, the kind of family aspect of it, and just people who are really excited to be there. Because talent can go anywhere, and you want to, as a company hiring people, you want people that are really excited about the purpose of the company. So getting that feeling from Maya and understanding, and then as it came on to the advisory council, getting to meet a lot of the staff and management, it's been fantastic. But it was really just, for me, a personal, this is a really cool company, and it's doing something really important, and it's solving a pain point for a number of corporations, and I would love to be part of it.
Awesome. We're so happy to have you on board. And so given that we're able to kind of free up environment teams in the company, free up their time, if you had a platform like Terrascope when you were looking at supply chain engagement and data, and you had less time spending on data and more time, what would you do with that time?
What we would do is probably play some of the consultant role of helping enable those suppliers. And once you've got the data from them, helping think through what type of upskilling or what type of support could be provided so that they have that internal knowledge themselves. Because if you're going to work with them to achieve goals collectively, just maybe some of that consulting aspect, or if you have enough budget, hiring a consultant. No, it's really just helping enable. So some of the things we talked about earlier, helping enable those suppliers. It would also be looking over the horizon, very important. Having strategic foresight to see what's coming down the line, to be positioned as the environmental team to start thinking about. Don't want to get distracted and off topic with what the role is and the mission of the company at the moment, but really being future focused and listening to those voices at the fringe. That is really important, because the fringe becomes the middle, becomes the dominant thing at some point. Not all of the fringe does, but those voices of NGOs or other stakeholders, communities that are out talking about things that to the mainstream may sound like, it may just sound really not kind of crazy maybe, but listen to the fringe and learn and collaborate. I think collaboration is the key thing.
Can I ask you one follow-up? So what is one thing on the horizon that you think we're going to see, and what is one fringe voice that you think we should be listening to?
One thing on the horizon, I mean, it's what we're all talking about right now, the fundamental shift that AI is what's happening right now in 2023. And we'll probably look back in a couple of years and think, oh God, it was so clunky, but the whole generative AI, I think that's just having such a profound effect across all society at all levels. And if it's not right now, it has the potential to do so. So that, and how does that inform what's happening to the company strategy internally? What is the board of directors thinking about that, and how is it going to impact products or services? In terms of fringe voice, I don't know, because I can't really point to any particular. For me, all voices are important, and all voices on the fringe, whether they're just starting to percolate out, they're all important. So I can't really pick one, because that would be knowing everything, right? So you can't. But just listening in and taking, and through stakeholder engagement, just hearing those other voices and taking that into consideration.
Getting back on those fisheries boats, or getting back on those office and factory floors, whatever is relevant for you from time to time, is super important.
Yeah, and absolutely. And those types of roles of being on the factory floor, but also being in the board of directors and presenting to the board, big findings that had, for some of those clients, had big strategic implications of where the companies ultimately went, and everything in between. So just having different roles in my career, but the ability to both walk the floor, the factory, and then, be in the management team, the C-suite, and then reporting to board of directors. Yeah.
So Karen, you've had this amazing career, starting very scientific and research-focused compliance, to looking at where sustainability is today and kind of global strategy, climate, and what's next for you? What's a kind of personal goal that you have looking ahead?
So thank you for asking. So my personal goal at this point in my career is to take what I've learned and my love of working in collaborative environments, purpose-driven environments, international environments, and take that, and for me, the next level would be helping advise the company on a new product. So Sustainability Advisory Council, just like I'm sitting on right now at Terrascope. The next would be helping to make some impact, and perhaps joining as a trustee of a foundation or a family office that is, giving out money to help maybe women-owned businesses, maybe sustainable, so that impact and investment or impact giving from a foundation or family office standpoint. And then the third is, and probably the largest, they're all equal, but another area that I'd like to do one or two of is be on a board of directors with a fiduciary responsibility to be part of the team sitting around the table thinking about the company's risks and opportunities and helping bring the knowledge that I have from my career to help do this, help the company be more sustainable, because, the climate and the activities we need to do as a global entity, business has a role, the private sector has a large role to play, and I'd like to be part of that conversation and helping enable companies to do what they can do to address the situation that we're in right now, and the tone comes from the top. So I'd like to be part of that collaborative effort as a board director to help guide that strategically.
Wonderful. On the point of philanthropic giving, there was an announcement recently, maybe last year, around Bezos's $10 billion climate fund, and someone had that job of figuring out how to spend $10 billion to create impact, which is quite a fun thought experiment. You've got kind of a bit of a blank check to drive impact in the world. What is the one or two things that you think you'd like to see if you were that head of that philanthropic organization?
What a great role that would be. How can I would like to see some real effort put in the communities that are being affected most by climate change, and those communities, countries, regions that don't really have the resources to address it. those that are being most impacted. And that applies to the supply chain, right, where all of these micro businesses, small business, medium businesses are being impacted, the supply chain in those communities, just the whole aspect of climate migration and drought and famine. And so I'd like to see, there have been pledges made, of course, whether it's a philanthropic approach or whether it's the commitments made by nations to do their part and donate money to do that and address it through the COP process and others. It's just really elevate that and don't just make it talk. Like, let's do something and let's make it important because we're all humans. We're all equal, and it just doesn't seem fair to me that this disparity between those that have and those that don't. So I'd like to see more of the money towards those other regions, and that may be part of the impact that I had living as a kid, following my dad in his work. And we lived in Africa for a short time, but it was enough to make a huge impact on me.
Which country did you live in?
We lived in Nigeria.
I also lived in Lagos for 4 years.
Oh, I lived in Port Harcourt.
Interesting. I should have figured with the oil and gas upbringing, but what an incredible place, and absolutely a lot of the impacts you see, I think, on a daily basis.
Yeah. I did a little bit of work with New York University, had an International Center for Enterprise Preparedness, and it was a private sector, public sector collaboration. And I brought climate as a topic to this group, who to that point had been focused on 9/11 type events and being prepared for the next 9/11, brought climate to their agenda for this annual forum that was held in Florence every year. And through that, we started talking a lot about national security issues around climate and climate migration, and that aspect of climate bolting into national security and geopolitical risks and so forth. And so I really, having that experience and learning more about really what was going on, I think that probably fed into the answer I just gave you around where would I spend the money.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we see it now really in the news every day. I mean,
thank you. I think that's a wonderful note to end on, the kind of moral elements and what's at stake, really, to get on that 1.5 trajectory, because the most vulnerable are at the most risk.
Yeah. Thank you, Leah. It was really a pleasure to be here today.
Thanks.
I enjoyed our conversation.
Likewise. Thanks so much, Karen.
Okay. Thanks. Cheers.
As we wrap up this episode, I hope the insights inspire you in your own journey towards our sustainable future. Stay tuned for more in-depth conversations with leading experts and changemakers in upcoming episodes. Subscribe to our podcast and visit our website at terrascope.com for more resources. This is the Terrascope Climate Cafe, serving up sustainability one conversation at a time.